So I think there was some reaction to, gee, we don't want kids in that exact spot, maybe over there. And so I thought, let's have that forum today. And then we'll send you forth to come back with a conceptual or.
And let's just make sure, okay, so we are at 5:25.
Yeah.
So we might wanna just spend 20 minutes going over it to allow for another 25 minutes to.
Yeah,
for
so until
discussion?
quarter of you present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to,
Okay, and so the way I structured the
So
presentation.
keep your questions, folks.
The way I structured the presentation actually was asking the questions at each area after I presented it. So do you think it would be okay to go in that format?
as long as we're keeping to the
Okay,
time,
so I'll go fast then. So, because people were uncomfortable with the overall programming before for a specific area, the children's play area, what seemed necessary was to talk about it holistically, the landscape, overall design from a programming perspective, right? There we go. Okay, so at the same time we're having the budget reconciliation discussion, and the direction that we've gotten over the last week or so is that we need to think about this project landscape, the site, as two things. We've been presenting the landscape design as one thing up until this point. From this point moving forward, we're going to be looking at the police station and the library and town hall as two separate projects. The library and town hall project, generally the landscape budget is on target with the kind of scope that we've been having in schematic design. For the police station, it's way above. So now the base bid for the police station will be the bare minimum necessary just to treat the site. It'll be hydroseed and asphalt or decomposed granite, very cheap materials and whatever is absolutely the minimum necessary to get permit biofiltration reasons.
This was, in consultation with our architect, this was kind of the direction we thought would be the best, most productive in order to meet the council's direction on the budget. So that's the genesis of this.
And those lines, just to be clear, are a conversation with Paul on how the site was divided out.
Yeah, 'cause I'm gonna break my request, but that oak woodlands, like, why isn't that part of the library? It's a big chunk of dirt, and it's right in front of the library garden.
Well,
The whole, you know where it kind of,
This one right here.
what looks like the barrel of the gun up there?
We're calling that oak woodlands.
this doesn't show up on the screen, but yeah.
Part of the rationale is that the.
But it touches the
footprint of
library.
buildings
Yeah, I know, I get
is
it.
the ratio.
Yeah, but that thing has very little to do with the other areas. It's like, I don't know, I would think about it, that oak, that little
Sure.
I think we should go from the library if we can, I don't know.
You just
cornucopia
have to
looking thing
I
up
mean,
there.
the idea of what is the library space is
Yeah.
what's around the library, what can the library JPA be comfortable funding from the library funds?
It's a percentage though, based on square footage allocation to the
But
site.
if it's close to them,
Right, so, I mean, you would just redraw that line.
That's who's gonna use it.
Include that section.
So only-
that's who's gonna
I
sit
think
over
that's
there,
a good
people using the
suggestion.
library, it's
So
not gonna be
this was
people
also
coming to the
driven-
admin.
So the only reason I'm jumping in that this was drawn this way is that we were looking at roughly a 60-40 ratio
Right.
of the overall site treatment area. And that kind of influenced the boundary lines too. So I might be able to take out maybe like the parking area by the library a bit or something like that in order to do that, because that is just
I
Mm,
asphalt.
don't think so.
I was
think
thinking
that parking area.
Specifically about the oak woodlands, cause
Yes.
that will get used by library patrons.
And
Okay.
it used to not be called oak woodlands, it used to be called something else, like a native grass area.
Oh.
Yeah, it
Alright.
is called that.
All right, Chris, you have the floor.
Okay. So we can move this boundary around, that's fungible, but in general, the concept is the police station has a base bid that's very simple, and then it's gonna have an ad alternate scheme. So when we look at that territory, we really are looking at each of these individual areas that could be separately funded projects, potentially through gifts or capital raising of some kind. And so we wanna review each of those areas for the design. But in general, for the conversation that we're gonna have now about programming the landscape, the cool features, the program that we're talking about, in general for the police station, we're talking about things that would all be in the ad alternate. All of the stuff we're talking about, fountains, seating areas, that's all in the ad alternate. For the library, the features that we're talking about is in the base bid, just to be clear.
So, let me just.
Yeah.
Within that map, I think what Steve's referring to is not everything that you're now calling oak woodlands, but it's what was the native species garden. It's that.
Yeah, right there.
Exactly,
Yeah,
I understand that.
yeah. And I don't think that we're tied to the percentage split on area as long as there's a rational basis, and given the proximity of that area to the library and that library patrons will be using it and it'll be an entry to the library, it seems reasonable to me that we would include that in the library.
So the only reason that we are doing it this way, and Paul, you have to chime in about the shuffling. If we add that in, you just need to know that in the estimate, right? To make the cost line up.
Because a lot of the other costs that you can't put your finger on an area, we just had to take a proration.
And I think that's appropriate.
The hardscape certainly isn't 60-40 right now.
Right.
Hardscape's about 80-20 or 85-15.
So
I mean,
they can be massaged, and that's.
But
not
I'm just
problem.
saying, you
We
can
just
dump
need
a
to be
lot of
clear
cost.
when Paul
You
reads
can
it out.
reallocate a lot of hardscape up there to the library.
Good.
Yeah, it's not changing the general percentages that we've used in terms of certain
Okay.
site work, like the roadways and stuff.
Well, that's the 60-40 split.
Yeah,
That's
that's
pretty much
reasonable,
across the
and
board.
that's reasonable.
Yeah.
But the roadways is not a 60.
Yeah, it doesn't look,
Yeah.
it doesn't appear
Right.
to be
This
60-40.
is talking about plant material
Right.
and
Yeah,
landscape.
okay.
Okay.
Good.
Keep going.
Keep going.
So ultimately, in this process, if we're gonna go forward with documenting a base bid scheme and an ad alternate scheme, because we're talking about ad alternates for so many different features and areas, it really makes sense to have two complete packages. One package of landscape design that's the base bid, one package that's the ad alternate that will be unified. So we don't necessarily want the contractor to have 50 different ad alternates that they're picking and choosing from, because that will be very difficult, both logistically and in terms of.
Chevy and
permitting.
Cadillac.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, these are generally the areas, the program areas that we presented in SD, and as we get into them, something that was talked about beforehand is how many people are we anticipating gathering in these spaces? There's a lot of different ways that you can do metrics and Legion modeling on public space design. These are 4 common metrics when we are looking at how many people are going to assemble in spaces. For this space in particular, we think that 50 people or square feet a person is generally a good day-to-day metric to have in mind for the amount of people that would be occupying it. And if you're going to have an event, such as a very small farmer's market, an art event, something like that, that a maximum of 15 square feet per person is probably a reasonable place to go. So we have some numbers based on how many people we can accommodate in these areas. So for instance, at the entry court, right now we're looking at having about 10 people there. That's not a very big space. This is pretty petite. This is also the area we were thinking previously of having the biofiltration basin being up in front and having a sustainable narrative as you come into the entrance of the lobby. One of the questions that was posed before was, can we have a fountain? What kind of fountain can we have? There's a number of different ways we could do this. We could either have a very small fountain program, which would have a correlation of having a small amount of water usage, relatively cheap comparatively. It could be a point fountain, it could be some small feature, a dribble feature, just to give a little noise. We could look at a linear pool, a large pool, a runnel. These systems all have very different impacts in terms of how you experience them. If people can be anywhere near it and touch it, it's going to need UV filters if it's going to be recirculating. So that is an added expense. So the fountains are not cheap in general in the public realm for long-term investment. You know, in terms of the style of the architecture is gone, there's 2 aesthetics that immediately jump out to me that might be relevant. One aesthetic is to go with a stormwater practice inspired fountain, something that's simple like a linear runnel attached to a pool that gives you a little bit of noise, but it's very simple detailing. The alternative is to go with something that's maybe a little bit more evocative of Spanish gardens. Now, the great thing about Spanish gardens and thinking about California climate is that there are a series of precedents of fountains that create a lot of noise and interest, but actually don't use a ton of water. So for instance, on the lower left, you have 2 spitters. This is very much taken from Moorish gardens originally, and it's kind of evolved over time, but it's not big, heavy jets. It's not a big, heavy Italianate or bowl fountain. If we look at the spilling bowl on the right, that's actually bigger pumps to get that kind of volume to move through space. And all of the amount of water that you end up moving directly relates to the amount of cost that you're going to have in MEP. So this is a decision that we're going to need, is what kind of fountain program would we want to have in the ad alternate scheme. In terms of seating, for the ad alternate, would we want to look at something that's very, very simple, just like a cast in place seat wall that somebody could linger at? We would probably need to have some percentage, at least 50% of intentional seating, be backed to comply with federal ADA. We could also go with a little bit of a higher end custom made seat wall with backing, or if we want to go much higher end of something built in place, we could go with stone. The other end of the spectrum is to go with off-the-shelf furniture. Now, off-the-shelf furniture is actually not as cheap in the landscape as people quite often think. The linear bench on the left, the Escofent bench, is running around $10,000 just for that object. Whereas the Victor Stanley bench on the right, very, very affordable, that's running around $800. So there's quite a range in terms of what you can invest in site amenities and furnishing. Generally, the higher end you go, the bigger, the heavier, the longer it lasts. The lower end you go, the more disposable it is.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
question? So how many linear feet of benches are you looking at and where is it
Let's see,
designed?
do I have it? So in the current design, we have about 26 linear feet of seating accommodated for.
Hold on, I'm at the alternate.
Earlier, it was earlier. Just
Oh, this
before.
is at the end, just summarizing. I think I didn't write the linear feet earlier. So this is about enough for 8 people to comfortably sit if they're willing to sit next to each other. Generally in public spaces, people tend not to like sit next to strangers. They tend to like a little space between themselves. But
So you have it in the B section as well?
so the A and B is referring
Oh, that's
to
the
where
sign.
a signage component could be located.
That's not the benches.
The 26 linear feet, sorry,
Is the-
should there be seating,
Right.
is just explaining that right now we're accommodating 26.
It's like near where the A is, or is it right here on the right-hand side of the entry
Right.
door?
Right now, we just have it alongside in front of this tree. So we have this seating coming in so that it's parallel to the path of travel.
26,
Yeah.
oh, okay, okay.
What did I skip? Oh yeah,
Here's the
that,
lobby.
so,
A question on those Victor Stanley benches,
yeah.
are they really light,
So
or
it's just right
what I'm worried about is people will come and steal them?
Oh, we'd bolt them to the ground.
Is-
Yeah.
Right.
So,
No,
No,
That is
Mhm.
with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
signage,
yeah,
that's
it's the right
signage.
it's the
question.
MA prank of the year, we're gonna go
It's right
steal the
here.
bushes,
I
the
don't
stuff
know
from.
that we even
Okay.
So-
need something.
so for instance, those Victor Stanley benches, if we go with something lower end, they're actually very, very durable for how much they cost. I think that just a regular black powder coated paint finish is probably the most unobtrusive and doesn't call attention to itself. For some of the higher end furnishings, like the Escofet bench, it's a piece of art. It's like a piece of
Yeah.
modern furniture. It's something that's actually like you want to see it.
And are those wooden slots there?
You can either do Ipe, Kumaru, you can do composite slats, you can do metal replacement instead. So there's a lot of different options for that sort of
Do
stuff.
you visualize people sitting on a bench outside the front door?
Only if they're waiting to be picked up.
Yeah.
We do have some senior citizens and somebody
know.
might go get a car and say, honey, you sit here while I go get the car. I meant, so,
But, I don't know, yeah,
So it may
26
be a
linear
Victor
feet of it,
Stanley.
I just think we need to provide
maybe
Seating
one.
something.
It's
someplace for
probably a
somebody to
Victor
sit down
Stanley
if they're
bench.
waiting to
Yeah.
be picked up.
And the other big question, Dee Dee, is you were the one who's like, I want a fountain in front of that. The
I
question
don't want
is,
if somebody's gonna pay
if
for
we
it,
want a
not go in there,
fountain,
so.
is that the place for it? That would be my big question is,
It's not 26.
that's walk-by
That's
traffic as opposed to, if,
Back.
one question is, do we want a fountain anywhere? Because it's not
Mm.
very green to put in a fountain, it's very non-green. But if we do want a fountain, is this it, or does it go in the central courtyard? Does it go by the library? Where does it
Goes
go?
in a central courtyard.
Because it could go at the library,
Mm.
Yeah.
where there's a budget.
Well,
And-
it's
and a
just-
public
it's-
fountain's
it's
at least
noise.
100 grand.
It's noise.
It's-
and
it's a big
sometimes
number.
noise will help.
Mm.
Yeah, George?
I just wanna make sure everybody's also thinking that we are totally changing the configuration of town hall and the way people congregate and use it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a single point of entry to building, planning, public works.
Yeah.
Police department, admin, finance. So where you don't see them waiting now, they might queue up in a singular point of entry.
Outside or inside in the
Both.
lobby?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, we can
Outside
keep going, but
signage.
let's keep, let that stir, because he'll get all the way through and then we'll say, we want the fountain there, or we want it somewhere else. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I'd say, I think that what Dee Dee said is right, that we need some kind of seating at the front, because I do think that this will become a different point of entry than we have right now, and there will be pickups and drop-offs there. That
Yeah.
definitely will happen. So maybe they can sit on
If
a
there's
bench
wall-
without backing, but
Seat wall.
some.
Seawall could.
But a
seat
seat-
wall
I
could
think
work.
a
That
seat
seat
wall
wall is
is
more
nicer.
expensive
Yeah.
than that Victor Stanley bench.
Exactly.
I'll tell you, the concrete wall is far more expensive than $800. 26 feet of concrete is $5,000 or something?
But you've got the bench in front of a seat wall.
10 grand?
You know, which kind
So
of
10
has,
grand.
making it look nice,
I-
but,
He showed it like that, it doesn't have to be.
yeah.
No, it
It
doesn't.
looks
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've got it in front of a planter or in front of the wall of the building,
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
And if we decide at some point in the future that we wanna add
Something
Victor
like
Stanley
that.
benches
Yeah.
as part of the FFE, we can certainly do that.
Right,
That's
I mean,
easy.
I would
Okay.
vote for not having it, you know, out the gate necessarily.
what does
Yeah,
that mean?
we'll have some kind of wall arrangement.
Oh,
that
don't put it
could
in,
be a seat
don't put a
wall.
bench in, okay.
Don't put anything in.
So it's
later
probably a seat wall,
As a
I-
furnishing.
and it may or may not have a fountain.
Well, because
I
you're gonna
guess
have
I'd
like
like
a
to know-
planter wall, aren't you? I mean, aren't you gonna have a raised planter bed or something there?
So if we,
It seems like
if
it.
we do the seat wall, then we can have the seat wall just be a thickened planter wall edge,
Yeah.
which
And I
is
think
simple.
that's
But we don't
easy
actually
for
need to
older
have
folks to
planter
sit
walls,
on.
we could also just we could
Keep
have a
it at
sidewalk
grade.
and have it drop down from grade from the sidewalk.
Mhm.
Unless it was
So-
like stormwater help.
Yeah, that's what we've been planning in general on the
Mm.
site, is to not have raised planters, cause that actually adds a lot of expense.
Mhm, mhm.
But in terms of the cost of the wall, I think that you could probably get around $100 a linear foot if it's just cast in place. Really simple, really cheap. Not like precast, not a
Got
nice
it.
finish.
Yeah,
And-
but just like this,
and
the
then
naked
behind
one
that,
up here,
an
not,
older
not the
person
stone
could-
clad
Right.
wall.
18 inches. Now the problem that we would encounter is that if we just call it a seat wall, or a wall, a site wall, or a planter wall, then we don't have to do the ADA compliance. But if we say this is the only seating for the entrance
Do
of
it.
the place, then we have to have 50% of the linear footage of seating have a back and have at least one place where they have handrails for somebody to get in on and off.
The bench is gonna be by far the cheapest option.
In terms of the water feature, what is the cost of a simple rental system like?
It would still end up being around 100 grand,
100 grand.
realistically.
You put a fountain in a public place, it's $100 grand.
And if
Yeah.
we didn't put a fountain
With the
there,
vaults
I don't
and
think a
water
would it
cleaning.
be,
That kinda looks like.
just native grasses or something?
Yeah.
We need to do something, cause
Well-
the front of that, the architecture on the front of that side is kind of,
Well, so what we were thinking of is having the biofiltration in the previous scheme, in the SD scheme, where, here we go, we had a line of biofiltration. We also had 2 lines of ornamental planning, so you could have a layered effect of kind of grasses stacking up against the building or shrubbery, maybe at the back of that, so it steps down to the road.
Okay.
So moving forward,
Thank you.
So what was the fountain? What was
I think my instincts, we wanna see the rest of the design, decide if there's a higher value add place that may also
okay.
have budgetary preferences for relocating a fountain to somewhere in there.
flexibility.
I think the library would love to have the fountain, and I think it would create a lot of ambient noise for events in that area. It's my gut, but we should think about how we feel about that.
So in this area, we were also previously anticipating having a site wall that had signage for the Civic Center mounted on it, either out in the island or built into the planter area at the front of the walkway. Is this a feature that you guys would like to keep moving forward?
What's the sign?
There should be some.
The question is the signage in the ground, is it a monument sign on the ground, or is it on the building?
on the ground? This-
No, but that's the question.
That's the question.
The question is, do you want to sign on Atherton Town Center,
Yes, I
or
Oh,
Oh, I think
Town
it's
Center,
not. I
or
think it should be on.
Town Hall, or,
Okay.
do you want it on the building?
We
No, on the
have both
building.
for this, right? We have something on the ground right across the street, and we have this on the building.
Can you
right
put the
in front.
rendering up of the front of the building?
The next one.
Yeah, right there. So you would either be in front of those cars somewhere.
Yep.
Or it would be up on the building, probably under the police department, or on the wing of the admin over the first floor
Or it
windows.
would be in the grasses where the picture's taken from.
I think it should, I don't think that it should, that was your A or B.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think B, if you're gonna put on the ground, B is better. It's right closer to Fair Oaks, so you can see it.
you can read it,
Is
yeah.
better.
But do you guys, do we prefer it on the building or on the ground?
Monument signs can be expensive,
Mm-hmm.
very
Okay.
expensive.
They're a cost
Mhm.
item.
Steve.
Well, what we have
What's
in
gonna
front of
be-
Town Hall
what's
right now
gonna
can't be
be
that
wrong with
expensive.
moving our historic sign that we already have?
Yeah,
And
if we
using
use
it.
what we have right now, it can't be
Oh, cause
that
you're gonna move it
expensive.
to the city hall. You're gonna move it to council chambers.
Yeah,
The one that's on this
What's that?
building?
well, no, that's
You
what,
know, I'm talking about the
There's a big
sign
one
that's
there.
The
essentially
wooden sign
across
that we
the
have out
The
there.
wooden sign,
Yeah.
the historic wooden sign.
Is it pretty?
I agree with that.
Is it really, are you joking or is it nice?
It's
Well,
not
we have
enough.
to change the arrows because the one arrow says fire department over there.
Can't move it, it's historic.
Something along that line, it can't be that
It's
expensive.
cheap, no,
Can't
no,
The
but
US Post
putting,
Office.
putting Atherton Town Center on this building in bronze letters is $1,500.
I don't
It's really
see us
nothing,
doing
it's a
that.
decimal
But
point.
see, I think it's more than just Atherton
Yeah.
Town Center because we're giving a wayfinder of planning and public works, building.
Oh, you'll,
Aren't
but
you-
you'll do that
aren't you
inside the
talking about
building.
something like that that
Do a
says,
smaller.
You'll do that as a little thing by the door.
okay,
By the door.
This is a
Yeah.
larger monument sign, if you even wanna have the larger
Well, that's
monument
the,
sign. you
do we
don't-
wanna, the first thing is, do you
I
wanna
don't
tell
want
people
one.
you've gotten to the Atherton, whatever we
I
call
don't
To
it?
know
Freestanding,
something that
no,
that it says something.
Yeah,
freestanding
Why
monument
wouldn't you
sign.
wanna use something like what we already have?
Well, I don't know, I have to look at it again. I mean, it looks pretty dated.
It's pretty
Sure we all
Ju- just to make sure,
It is dated.
wayfinding signage
Yeah,
is-
it's really important.
is really important, but it's also general fund, it's not donation, and
It's not construction.
it's not construction or design, so.
All right, gold plated.
So if we're talking about $1,500, talk about what you want, because it's not the,
Seriously,
yeah.
I don't know.
So we actually have a
Doesn't
lot of
really-
features that we're
If
gonna
you
go
look at
through,
the
so.
exterior of the building,
think
we
there's
have to
not
listen
a
to
lot
this
of
whole
room
thing.
for it.
okay.
Okay,
Right.
so
Well,
how about,
and then we'll come back and make
yeah,
decisions.
so
I
It'll
would
take so
say-
long if we make them as we go.
Steve, I would just say that this is going to be the building on Fair Oaks, right? People are gonna see this, this is going to become the landmark of Atherton.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be the buildings right by.
And if you had up on the wall of the building Atherton, even if you didn't have town hall, if you just had Atherton, it would tell people they're here, because
Yeah, no,
they
no,
don't necessarily really know they're in Atherton, but it seems to me that some kind of sign, similar to what we have out front, makes sense.
we need a sign. It'd be silly if we didn't put one after this whole process. B, I don't think using an old sign that sits in front of a crappy looking building is probably the right answer.
okay.
Sorry
So,
for the tape.
so for the rest of the presentation,
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly go through the full scope of all the
Great.
decisions, and then we'll come back to things where we wanna discuss.
Nobody
Okay.
can ask any questions.
Yeah.
So for the Civic Court, we're looking at an informal gathering of about 50 people
Oh, hang on,
at
let me
any
get,
one time.
you guys, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold all questions from everybody, every single one of us, including me, including you guys, our council members, everybody, until we get to the very end. So if you got a question, write it down, make yourself a little note.
I just needed to know where the bench seating was.
That's
gonna
okay,
be.
that's
It's a
okay, but we're
question.
no more, he's gonna get all the way through, then we'll
Okay.
open for questions.
And you'll
But
see the full scope of what
keep
needs to be
talking, Chris,
discussed.
just don't stop.
All right, so in the Civic Court, we're looking at an area where we have enough space that we're gonna accommodate a gathering, loose informal gathering of people who don't know each other, not focused on an event, about 50 people. If we have an event, we can accommodate up to about 300 people in the space. It's a big space, actually. What does this mean? So if we're looking at something where we would wanna have a stage, a small concert, we're looking at around 100 people viewing. If we add the lawn, about 280 viewing in the current configuration in the SD set. If we're gonna have art market or food truck events, these are just similar densities that we could, it's viable to have a small event space. So one option that was discussed or brought up before was the idea of, well, we have this ornamental planting area right now, what if that was lawn? And the lawn would add about enough space for about another 100 people to occupy, but we already can accommodate about 280 people without the lawn.
Where's the ornamental plan?
No question, no, keep going, keep going.
So the ornamental planning, just so you know, is in the crescent. See the green crescent on the southern, or on
The
the one?
trees.
Yeah,
Not the trees, the one that looks like a this
Yes,
one here.
yep.
Yes.
Newly planted.
all right. The other question was, we don't really have enough space anymore to put trees right up against the building and not have it make things work well with the circulation. Do we wanna have vines on the building? Do we wanna have vines either clinging to the building itself, or do we wanna have a cable system? Cable systems are actually a significant investment, a lot less expensive than a green wall, just. For seating, again, we had discussed having a built-in wall. Maybe it could have been upgraded to stone, maybe it could be cast in place concrete. For the movable seating, there's a number of families of furniture out there, from the relatively high end to the relatively low end. Seating can actually, the movable chairs can become an identity driver for a public space very, very quickly. At the high end, the Luxembourg Fur Mob chairs are classic, they're very Parisian, and they are well known as a thing that has kind of become ubiquitous of certain famous spaces in history. The Park Center chair in the middle is a solid, durable piece of equipment that still looks elegant. It's about half the price of the Furmob. Furmob's around $1,000 a piece, which is crazy. The Victor Stanley are cheap and unfortunately ugly, but they're cheap. So,
How durable are the Stanleys?
No, no,
oh,
keep
they're
going.
very durable.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Paul.
So,
Never mind.
The nicer ones will go to MA in
Keep
a
going,
minute.
keep going.
moving along. For paving options,
Oh, I'm sorry.
there's a number of things that we can do. We talked about doing top cast concrete. In this case, the drainage pattern would shed into all the planters. It would be an impervious surface, but it would look like gravel, but it would still be an ADA surface. The next higher end material would be a resin bonded aggregate. This is porous, so this makes the whole site porous, but actually really simplifies some of our biofiltration basin requirements. So even though you end up paying for a higher premium per square foot, you save a little bit on plumbing and biofiltration basins. Other options are
Like that?
Keep going, keep going.
decomposed granite. Resin bonded gravel is ADA surface. Decomposed granite requires more maintenance. It's much cheaper. Sometimes it's good, in our experience, to have an ADA accessible pathway that's not dependent upon the decomposed granite, just because of maintenance issues. And then gravel pave is technically an ADA surface where it's a grid underneath gravel. However, it is loose gravel, so there's an association of that. That is the absolute cheapest thing of these options for covering an area. So for instance, in that pad in the middle that you see in the Civic Court, we could change out that pad with things that might not necessarily be the highest end material, but you do get trade-off in terms of maintenance, in terms of people being able to kick material around, and in terms of accessibility. So the decisions, you can read through these if you'd like. I don't need to go through ad nauseum, but mainly, do we want the seating? Do we want turf or ornamental planning? Do we want to transplant these large oaks? That's a major cost item. It helps the continuity of the forest canopy as we see it now and saves some of the trees that will be demoed in the process of building this project, but it does come at a cost.
Thanks, nice, great.
So that was the vision as of SD. Moving on to the Cedar Garden, our most contentious area. For here, we're looking at the number one priority is to preserve the two wonderful day-door cedars in front of Town Hall. And because of that, we have a lot of limitations because the way the ground is sloped up right now, the critical root zone of the trees is going to prevent paving from being put in here in any substantial way. So if we want a pathway, we want to look at something like flagstone or something that can be laid softly into the softscape area. That would not be the primary ADA path. The primary path would go up the ramp by the library. We had talked previously of having play features woven informally into the garden space. This could be flat out eliminated. This could be enhanced into more recognizable play equipment. This could be relocated. Within the native garden area, we're looking at 14 heritage oaks that we would like to preserve as much as possible. And we'd like to also enhance this canopy. Along the pathways, we had held these custom benches, linear seats with a backing on them, so they would actually be true benches. They would fulfill the 50% ADA accessibility. These features are a really good opportunity for adding something that's artful or identity forming in the landscape. These are a few precedents at the top of how custom benches can be done. Custom benches like this, we're looking at prices anywhere from $400 to $800 a linear foot for how complex they are. So for instance, the bench on the far right is a parametrically modeled, CNC carved, complex, beautiful object. The bench on the left is actually very typical and it's all the same module, so it's very easy to install, relatively cheap. Something more around $500 a linear foot. The benches below are off-the-shelf products, so if we don't want to go with the complexity and cost of custom products, there are off-the-shelf products that have a range and price.
Next. Keep moving.
For these native gardens, and actually for the whole site in general, our overall planting strategy to kind of bring the narrative back, was having this mixed age canopy stand where we are going to be replanting with similar trees, the Quercus lobata, so that in 50 years, when all the old oaks out there are dead, that are in decline now, that there's a new canopy that's coming into its full measure. So when we think about this design, do we like, the main question really is, do we like the seating? Should there be as much seating as we have? Right now we have enough for 50 to 60 people to sit in these gardens. It's quite a lot of people. Or is there a certain amount of people that we want to be able to accommodate? Do we think a group of 30 is enough to accommodate in these gardens outside in front of the library? And then the second decision is, should we focus on adding new trees into this area? Trees come at a significant cost. Or should we just work with the existing trees that are preserved and have a cheaper treatment for the understory planting? Depending on how difficult and garden-esque we want to be. For the library, the main area out in front at the library deck is a ramp coming up to the door, bringing you up to the level of the library, and then you have the shared deck breakout space. So we're looking at an informal gathering around 40 people here and holding an event, say wine tasting or something, breaking out from this room as an event around maximum of 100 people occupancy. That's actually enough that you could even have a small wedding on it if you wanted to, just to put it in context. For this library deck space, we can look at how we program the library deck through two things, either through furnishings that are added to the deck that are movable or could be moved aside for an event, such as renting it out for a wedding. There are relatively affordable tables and chair features, just like we talked about in the Civic. But there are also, if we wanted to have more of a outdoor lounge collection, making it feel more of a comfortable outdoor loungy residential type feeling, if that was of interest. Those are more expensive, but usually use a lot less of them when you program a space. The other option is to not have movable furniture, or to minimize the amount of movable furniture it is, and to have any kind of seating or features that we want in the deck built into the deck itself. So we could either have built-in planters if we wanted to have softened edges around the library, we could have built-in seating, we could have a railing at the edge overlooking all of the gardens. In general, the more complex that the decking becomes, if it has rails, if it has built-in seating, the more expensive it's going to be. It's fairly simple and intuitive. If we keep it a simple, flat, blank slate, like the picture on the left, it's going to be the most affordable. Now, the other thing that we talked a little bit about when we were talking about cost value engineering that I did not include in this presentation is the option of eliminating decking and having it be hardscape and having a retaining wall. And that's actually fairly cost competitive with decking. So if the decking isn't important to you, we can accomplish it with more of a patio look.
It doesn't have to be raised.
Well, to get into the library, we're going to have it be elevated, so we'd have a retaining wall, and that's why the cost isn't as great.
Just keep going. Thank you. 'Cause I'm going to manage the crap out of this conversation when we finish.
So at the very back, we have the reading garden. Looking at the reading garden, it's not a huge space. We're looking at about 10,000 square feet for a small park-like space, with biofiltration basin being a major part of the program, and then ornamental planting. We had talked about a number of seating options, from things that were more playful, such as hammocks in the reading garden, to porch swings on the deck, to just having it be the same language as the rest of the site. Maybe it's just seat walls and whatever the language of movable furniture that is in the Civic Center or on the library deck is the same for one unified site. So with the deck back there, we have the same kind of approach. Do we want the same complexity as the front? Do we want to have it be simple? And that's about it. So these are the key areas that we're talking about. And those are really the fundamental decisions that we kind of need to get at so that we can make a real design development set.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I didn't realize we were going to get so much detail today. Like I was which is lovely, but I'm a little afraid it's like we all walked into Neiman Marcus and it's like, what does everybody want in every department? You know, which pair of earrings and which belt and which pair of shoes. for this group to do this in half an hour would be impossible. So I think what would be the most important thing to talk about first is user issues. So not architecture. There was a lot of architectural questions about, do you want DG or do you want, what, do you want a metal bench or a wood bench, or and aesthetic questions. I think the first question is, what do we want to do in each space? And you did present that. And so I think first round we should talk about use of space. Like, is there anything that he recommended on use of space that people didn't like? The Civic Court, he showed a parcel for farmer's market or a small concert. On the library terrace, one thing I jumped out to me was it's 100 people. That I have some feelings about that. So I'd like to start there with use of space, as opposed to, hey, I like the green chairs from Luxembourg versus the red ones versus they'll steal them all. Let's just
We're all gonna go.
chain them all to the ground. So let's start with use of space. Why don't we open it up and just people come up one by one with what you're feeling on the uses of each space.
So the main questions, maybe let's go through them.
Let me just let these folks, let's just give them a chance. Anybody, I'm happy to go first if people aren't ready. Okay, so for me, I usually wait. The entry court, I think it's a walk-through space. I think it has to look good from the road, and it has to look good as you walk through. So for me, to put a $100,000 fountain there rather than somewhere it's gonna people are gonna sit and read a book and listen to it, is a waste of money. So I would focus on moving the fountain somewhere else. And I think having a bench for somebody to sit while somebody picks the car up to go out is a great idea. Otherwise, it just needs to be simple and elegant. That's my feeling. Civic Court, I love your idea. I love to have a farmer's market or a art fair. I mean, in Atherton, wouldn't that be cool? I mean, I was like, got me so excited. Lawn or not is a big question, and then we get into green. Is it turf or is it grass or what is it? That's a great discussion for us to have. The library terrace, to me, I would want to know that you could have 250 people somehow in that zone. Whether it's including inside, maybe it's not 250, but 100 seems small. 100, if you'd said 150, I would have said, yeah, that feels right.
100 just on the deck.
Yeah, so what I want to understand is if you have 150 people, where would they be?
Number, 80,
Yeah.
on the left of it.
And does that work? Can you do that if you if somebody rents the library for a huge event and they bring 150 people, or not such huge, but can you do it? Is there can they go here and there? Would it work? Would it be a cool space? But then our question is, do we want to rent the library? Do we want to rent town spaces for private events or not? Maybe it's only nonprofits or something. Maybe there's some limit. The reading garden, I really would love to hear from Tom and the library committee and the Friends of the Library. Is it worth the money? Because how do people feel given today, how they feel about the Redwood Zone? Like, are we programming something that looks great on a plan, but will they use it? Yeah, the Maker's Yard, and we didn't go into very much, but the Maker's Yard, Librarian's Garden, and Reading Garden, they really should drive that. That should come out of the library folks. They're gonna pay for it. They should drive that. This committee should have some token amount of veto power, but they really should drive that, is what I think. So those are my big feelings. I think we should be careful that this group doesn't micromanage architecture. I think we have to be careful. I think we have to really stick to user things. I think transplanting the trees is a great thing for this town. We are a town about trees. I think if it costs $100,000 to transplant the 5 most important trees here, it's probably worth the money. I think there'll be a lot of people who will be happy. I think wooden benches outside this town does not want to spend. Wood is an annual maintenance. They sand it down, they revarnish it. It's a nightmare. To have a bunch of that here, I think, is asking for trouble. So I would really avoid wood benches. That's me. Those are my feelings. But any other user feelings before we get into?
Well, I just wanted to ask a question about one of your comments about transplanting trees. What's the viability of doing that? Do they survive? Because what's the percentage of survival? Is it 50%, 70%?
It completely depends on the conditions of the root system when you cut the tree out of the ground. So once you excavate around the tree, you can really make a better estimate. So what we would probably do is identify like the top 10 candidates, and then as site demolition is happening and site mobilization is happening, we would pick from those trees that are going to be removed the best ones to move at the time after they excavate some of the roots, so we can actually see what we're looking at. Because you never know, especially like there's a wonderful tree that's caught in a curb right now, that maybe all the roots are going into one area that is very difficult to excavate. And generally you want a crown that spreads out nice and evenly, and you can't know that until you do an investigation.
And when you, let me follow up on that, when you excavate them, the site's not gonna be ready for them.
Right.
You box
So
them
you
up.
box them up?
Yeah, so the great thing about mobilizing and installing on the same site is that we would actually probably cut like half the ring of the crown at the beginning of mobilization, cut the other half like 3 months later while irrigating, and then box it and have it be stored on site until it goes into the prepared site home. It actually really increases the likelihood of making this successful. When you have to ship it down the road, it gets a lot harder.
It don't spin the trees.
Yeah.
It's tempting to turn them for how they look best in the new place, and we did that, it killed the tree, because they're not used to sun on one side, they're used to it on the other side.
Yeah, they'll get burned.
They don't like it, so they get sunburned and they die.
Yeah.
It's a very temperamental process. I remember being on planning commission, you know, the homeowners would come and offer that as an alternative to something that they were actually supposed to be doing.
Right.
And so we acquiesced and said, okay, and they almost always failed.
And generally, it's
Yeah.
not considered. Well, actually, in terms of failing, that's actually probably a really bad arborist. In terms of offsets, usually it's not considered the equal of preserving a heritage tree. Transplanting is considered the same as killing it, just in terms of code. That said, you can transplant trees, and as long as you do it properly and you document it properly and the contractor implements it properly, it's something you can feel very strong.
The smaller the
positive
better.
about.
Yeah, the smaller the better. So what size are we considering, and what's
We
the
probably
cost?
wouldn't want to be able to do one. We wouldn't want to do one that's much more than 15 to 18 inches.
Okay.
Up to 18 inches. 18 inches is a big
Big,
box.
yeah.
Or it's actually, we would probably burlap it. We wouldn't box it because it's too big.
Yeah.
But if you do 10 to 12 inches, it's actually, the side by average chip's quite good. So,
So with that, so do people want to go into should we go section by section then,
So,
and ask for decisions?
And maybe you can talk just in general about seating, you know, free seating or integrated seating. Fountain, where, yes or no, and if so, where? Just sort of general, because I think I heard a couple of like, we don't want movable seating, someone's gonna take them. So that tells me, no matter where it is.
Do you feel the same way? I tend to agree. Unless there's, like, for that deck, you may have seating in this room that can go out.
Yeah.
But I think at nighttime, there's no chairs out there that you can throw in your pickup and drive away with. Does anybody feel differently?
And you're talking about the base bid for the, you know, for the police, city hall portion of being flat, no walls,
yeah.
no curbs, whatever.
Literally just
So
hydro-seed,
you're
no
really
trees.
getting input on what is the preferred ad alternate
Right.
input, correct?
Now, in terms of movable seating,
Which
there are
could
two
change
other.
over time, if you didn't do it a year after, you know, if you didn't do it in the first 6 months or a year, let's say fundraising continued, 2 years after the Civic Center opened, you could have a much more elaborate, you know, ad alternate.
Okay, so does anybody really like the idea of furniture that you can pick up and move from here to there, outside?
I think on what you're calling the library terrace, I really think that's gonna be defined by the cafe. I mean, calling it the library terrace is fine, but I think it'll be a space that people will come and sit in largely when, you know, their kids are in the library or they're just having a meeting and they've come to the cafe.
So that could be F&B and put on the cafe budget.
And actually, it could be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, the cafe could have a small environment and that doesn't spread out over that. It's a pretty large deck.
They have the deck comes in front of the building there. You see where it wraps around. I don't know if it's deep enough there, but.
Yeah.
That's mostly
So
Yeah,
it's,
but
it's,
it doesn't
it's
have to use the
F&B.
whole deck.
It's
Doesn't
not,
have to use the whole thing.
But I would
They
think those
have
are
movable-
tables that
yeah,
are movable.
Yeah.
Can I
That
clarify
aren't
something?
fixed.
Yeah.
If it's movable furniture, you gotta store it someplace.
Yeah.
We've been
that's why I
talking
think
about-
it's probably in this room.
Yeah, so and George, do
probably
you have
right
the
off
staff
the
that's gonna
terrace.
be there
No.
to do that moving?
It'd be the cafe.
Well, but it'd
Well,
be the cafe owner, you know.
So, and you're
Somebody's gonna
talking
operate the
4 or
cafe.
5
Only for
tables.
the cafe though, right?
So there's one other option of movable
Yeah.
furniture is having it be chained with a limited leader.
Yeah.
Like the tables can be
Table,
changed, but the
something.
chairs probably come in.
Right, or the
Yeah.
chairs are chained to the table, so it's a pain to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the table's screwed to the ground.
I
But
don't wanna
that's-
see
yeah.
chains on this site, I'm sorry, I think
Yeah.
it's
Cables.
But there's
How about
some way to do it, you see furniture on Santa Cruz Avenue. I mean, it can-
But the big picture is,
You're gonna have a deck, you can
a
manage
few
that
tables
without
and
it
chairs
being too
for a small
obtrusive.
cafe is probably a good idea
Right.
on that terrace, right?
Okay.
That,
So-
we're all kind of set in there, and how you secure it is a different matter, but it can be, F&E, so that it's a part of the general budget and not part of this
We've got a police
project.
department right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so that's piece one. So in general, we're talking about built-ins, whether it's benches that are concrete bolts in the bottom, or they're, built-in, cast-in-place walls or stone walls, they're fixed.
So how do you guys feel about that decision? Benches versus cast-in-place walls versus nicer seat walls like, with wood backs or stone veneer or anything like that?
For the library terrace or for
General,
elsewhere?
In
elsewhere.
Can I ask a question, back up a little bit, the library terrace and deck have different meanings to me. A terrace kind of is flat and a deck is a raised, some kind of wood or stone or something. I would be hesitant to say, put a wood deck out there, it's gonna be maintenance. And then,
So it
So-
has to be raised, just because we have to get people
yes, we have to
up.
get up. And,
So one issue on the wood, just to talk about, what we presented previously was using material Dasso, it's a composite. But also in general, if you wanted to go with the composite, or if you wanted to go with like a tropical, neotropical hardwood like Kumaro or Ipe, all three of them go gray if you don't do anything about them. They are all extremely rot resistant, so it's not like a pine deck that you're going to need to stain every summer. Likewise, if you had wood in benches or furnishing, usually you would go with something that would just go gray, like teak. That requires very little maintenance over time.
So one thing also to remember, as much of the site that can be porous and allow water through, the better.
People are gonna prefer if we can get a long-lasting, either Ipe or a poly, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
People are gonna enjoy it more to stand on it than
oh
concrete.
yes.
I think for that space, whatever is the most attractive
Yeah,
and
and the library.
useful makes the most sense. There's more money in the library
Yeah.
budget than we can possibly use. We're gonna be giving some of that budget to the other members of the library as we go forward, so it's more money than we can use. The cost is not the problem, it's what's reasonable and makes sense and
So
is attractive.
it's probably low-maintenance plank.
Right, 'cause the cost for us comes into the maintenance.
And year round.
No, we don't have any costs.
Yeah,
For
you're
any
right.
of that, we don't, the town
You're-
has
yes,
zero
you're
cost.
right.
Even on maintenance.
Yeah, even on
Yeah.
maintenance, 100% cost of the library, and the library has more money than we can
And it all
possibly
comes from the
spend.
property tax.
Thank
You
God.
pay
And then the fountain.
Yeah.
So who,
So I just wanna say, on the library deck, because I think it has to be raised to get up to the level of this
Something
building,
does, yeah.
yeah,
it probably makes sense for at least where there's a drop off from it, for there to be either a seat wall or some kind of,
Edge seat.
wall, that railing that, like you've shown in here.
Can I clarify one thing? So if it's less than 30 inches, you can have a little seat, but you don't need a rail. And it's probably not worth putting a rail in, because it'll,
Do we know that it will be less than
We can
30
grade it
inches?
so that it's
We're gonna-
less than 30
I think that
inches.
would be the better way to do it.
So you'd have a seat along the edge, and so it would raise it higher than 30 inches. So if some little child is,
So that-
standing
that-
on the
Rick was
on the
saying something
seat.
different, I think. I think he was saying people outside the deck could sit on the deck, as opposed to having
No,
a
that's
seat
not
wall
what
on
I
the
was
edge of the
saying.
deck.
No.
No?
I don't, yeah, no, I was saying, looking at it from the deck, if,
Standing on the deck.
yeah, I mean, a seat wall along there, I don't think the cost is a problem if that's the most attractive solution.
Well,
And if there's a maintenance
falling
and,
off is, I think.
But-
yeah, but if you have a seat wall,
The-
you're
The
not.
most attractive is that stools along the edge idea they showed us. That would be really cool.
Yeah,
Which one?
it's pretty.
The one where they show the wires and then there are stools and there's a little, like, coffee, like, you work on your laptop thing there. Like, that,
Built-in table railing.
right, the one on the bottom right. That would be the most elegant solution.
Mm.
or the one, in the
Built-in
middle,
seating.
built-in
The middle,
seating.
the built-in seating.
Yeah.
It looks like Tahoe, no.
Yeah, it does look,
Either one
it
is-
probably
either
is
one of the
Tahoe.
answers in the middle works.
So why don't we just sort of look at that and bring?
Yes.
'cause
Okay.
That's something that we can
mostly
develop
like
later on
Yes.
too.
Right,
Yeah.
but you're getting,
Like the one in the middle.
Yeah.
the one in the middle, okay, that's the general consensus.
Yeah, I agree.
The question is, how do you do it with wood that doesn't require a ton of maintenance? So it's it's probably the same wood, as whatever we're using in the floor.
Yeah,
I think
that's actually Kumaro in that picture,
Yeah,
which is a competitor with eBay.
I think that's
I think it's
nice.
good.
I like
Then the
that.
next question is fountain. Do people want to keep the fountain in front of the building, or do you want to move it to a high-traffic area, or an area where you're more likely to have an event? So,
Unless it's a really spectacular fountain
I don't
in
think
the,
we
in
need
the
it.
front.
Yeah.
No fountain at all?
I'm against that fountain.
no fountain, not even over by the library, no fountain, okay, kill the fountain.
Unless the library pays for it.
Well, no, that's what I'm
Well,
saying, they
that's the
will.
Library would pay for it.
So if you come up with a,
Then
guys,
we've
it
got
would be
these
the,
trees, we don't want water issues
Yeah.
around some of these trees.
Yeah.
Am I right about
Okay.
that?
Unless you feel strongly about the fountain, I think that if we're going for all the sustainability points that
Yeah.
we're going for, fountains are, in my experience
They're
with other
no-nos.
projects, they're very, even if you figure it all out, they're very politically not sustainable, even if you figure out how to make it
and you're
sustainable.
supposed to turn them off in a drop.
Right.
Okay, next one is you asked, do we want, around the rest of the site, not in the library, do we want concrete seat walls or furniture? And my personal preference is, we don't know enough to know where we want concrete seat walls, because we're never going to take them out. But if we put in furniture, like benches that are secured, you can always move them, it's no big deal.
Yeah, you can figure it out later. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
What works and what
Cost-effective.
doesn't.
Yeah, I would be very hesitant to put in cast-in-place seat walls
Absolutely.
until we are
Where
App-
are you, where are you referring?
Just
civic
anywhere,
court, in front of the
yeah.
building.
We have them all
Anywhere
over the
you
place.
Native
start
garden,
thinking
yeah.
about
I just
putting
wouldn't do it.
benches.
It costs a lot.
I agree.
You've got to be absolutely positive. It costs a lot to take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's clear.
Okay.
The other question that I wanted to get was the children's play aspect.
I think
Uh,
that's going
We definitely don't want it in the Cedar Garden. That Elizabeth was really clear about that.
Mhm.
So what is
Well-
going into Cedar Garden, I think, is a big question.
Yeah,
Well,
It could be a horticultural ornamental garden, maybe with a bench that people could, with flowers and native plants, it could be lovely.
And that's, the Cedar Garden's under these
Right?
trees.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
right.
But won't the water kill these trees?
You'd have to plant things that can live
Native,
underneath these
that's what he's
trees.
saying, yeah.
Well, and they've got
They
some
match
kind of
the-
a new, pathway through them, because
Splat-
we're gonna take up these, pavers,
Mhm.
and then you've got some other kind of thing.
By the way, I don't think these are pavers. Isn't this just
It's
overnight?
concrete.
It's, yeah, but they showed it as bricks. I was cracking me up.
Overnight.
It's
Right.
overnight, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
We could put it in the reading garden, that could add program to the reading garden.
Put what in there?
Put what
Some
there?
of the features that children could play on.
Yeah, and that's where I would talk to the library.
Yeah, except that that's under the
Well, I was thinking that, I mean, I
library's
appreciate
silent
what
reading
Steve was
area.
saying, and maybe when we talk about the library program, we can talk about whether or not.
I would put that in on hold.
Okay.
They need to love it, and then we can say, yeah, we're okay with it or
Right.
not. Yeah.
So I think the issue with that is we have a whole children's play area in the park, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
relatively close
Mhm.
and is quite used.
Mhm.
I know that the idea of putting it in between the cedar trees was that kids could have, older kids or younger kids, one age group that's in the library and another age group
Yeah.
could be playing around while the parents had a cup of coffee. But I'm not sure that is really gonna happen. I don't know. And we had some ideas at one point, we had a children's playground area planned. But because of what we have in the park, it's really not necessary. I think all of us feel like this area out there is really defined by those trees.
Mm-hmm.
So to build something that respects those trees and that they're the base
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
rather than the concept of a children's play area, that should be the dominant theme.
That's great.
So frankly, when we did our public outreach and, for the master plan area, we asked, do you want children's play area with the library? Go, we've got a park, it
Great.
was clear that
That's great.
the public was,
I think
did
the
not
only
know.
reason that we're even thinking about it was one of you mentioned taking some of the trees that would come down
Right.
and using parts
Well-
of them as, reconstituting them as climbing things
Yeah,
or
Yeah,
what.
structures.
It was
And
less
that's the
about
only reason I think we've gone back to talking about it.
Right, and it was more just like a giant boulder.
it doesn't look like a plaything. You know, it's not screaming, this is a playground, but it could be rocks and kind of just literally logs placed nicely. That in case there were kids, they're not running around the deck. There's something to kind of keep them busy for 15 minutes.
But I think in general I think what you've heard is anything from the front face of that library to the left is not kid focused.
Mhm.
Okay, that's clear.
That's civic. It's meant to be.
It's also between these two buildings, this one and the new council chambers, and that space in a lot of ways. The cedar trees will be between the two, and that will kind of be an entry, a back and forth between these two buildings that reflect one another.
Okay.
So can I
Yes, please.
recap?
Yep, and,
Mike?
yep.
Okay.
Before you do, I'm sorry, one point. Tom,
Yes.
the whole area on the other side of the library now, that's open space with a little parking area and there's a little walking area out there. I've seen that over the summertime being used by your summer kids programs. And they're actually out there playing tag and,
You're about the reading garden?
yeah, that's where the reading garden is now. Yeah, they've been out there having little outdoor events and tag and reading stories and sharing time,
They do
things
use
like that.
Okay.
Where would you envision them doing that? I don't think the reading garden is looking to be designed in that way now unless you change that. Because that might be the civic court or the other area where they end up.
Well, I mean, from what I've seen of the landscaping plan for the civic court, I don't think that would be appropriate.
Sounds like we need
I
to
think
sit
you're
down
right,
and talk
yeah.
about the reading garden and how we want the reading garden.
George, you're trying to head off a problem, yeah. I think we want a place for the kids. I think it wants to be on the other side of the library. And I think it's not meant to bring more kids to the library. It's meant to be kids who are at the library who, it's fulfilling existing needs, not creating new ones.
So
Parents could probably watch the kids from the deck too. You know, they could read on the deck and be able to watch the kids as they play.
It is the quiet room right next to that.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, just as a reference point. We can talk about that more.
So what's in the native garden area?
So the native garden would be mostly horticultural collection with a few benches, primarily focused on providing at least a psychological visual screen to the train and the parking beyond. So we would have larger shrubby species that would be part of the native oak understory, building off of the canopy that's there, but with the understory actually reflecting the original ecology of that planting typology. So it wouldn't actually be providing a significant acoustic cover compared to the sound of that train, unfortunately. And because of the existing oak trees, we don't want to dramatically regrade it. If we could probably get a little, if we had no oak trees, we could build bigger mounds, but to do that would effectively wipe them all out. So it's really focusing on building on that asset of the nice existing trees.
And so what is that, the area that's snug right against the library, you know, curve, that's between the pathway?
So that would be the same kind of planting typology. So when we get into a detailed planting plan, the idea is to have the overall planting to feel garden-esque and of Atherton, but composed of California natives.
So I'm just gonna summarize it, because it's pretty important for our next step. So in general, as Chris started out, we have we have two scopes lined to be moved around a little bit. The library, what we discussed, is a part of the base bid. The Civic Center base bid is not what we talked about today. It's just, you know, whatever we can do with DG or simplified sort of landscape to
But we've eliminated a lot of the alternates. So we've eliminated concrete, poured in place, or stone walls.
right, but we still have
We've
to-
eliminated a fountain, so we're
Agreed.
really down to DG, walkways, and some benches.
Yeah, and
Well,
we-
also
and
the
we-
planting would be very different between
Okay.
doing an
Right.
actual ornamental planting and just hydroseeding everything.
I just want to make sure, because this is the way we have to sort of handle.
Where would you be
costs.
hydroseeding? That wasn't clear, I think.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Base
doing
bid.
any landscaping
No landscaping.
essentially around
No.
the Civic Center.
But where would you be doing hydroseeding?
In the base bid for the police station side,
Where? Can
all
you
of-
like
everything
point at
that's
something?
green
Point
right
to
now,
where there's a road there, it's gonna be.
everything that's green in the
Taken out.
base bid right now, for the purposes of this conversation,
But you would put DG, where would the DG be going in, or the walkways are all in?
Probably the DG might be this big pad. We probably would want to have it a minimum asphalt path. The asphalt's even cheaper than DG actually if you do it at big enough scale. So since we're doing all these roads, if we did all the main circulation pathways in this area as asphalt,
Not as concrete.
not as concrete. Asphalt's cheaper than concrete. Because the whole idea is that we need to make the base bid for the police station cost the absolute minimum. They want the absolute minimum possible to have a
We're gonna
permitted
hate
project.
asphalt.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna hate
Yeah.
the base bid.
No.
So
Can
that's
we
why we
cover
need to
it
raise
some
money.
other way?
So
That's why you need to
my
restate
thought
that.
about trees, people
We
will
could stamp
fund
it.
trees, people
No,
will
can't.
donate, I mean,
Paint it.
even for the event
I've
garden,
done it.
they
looks a
put
hell of a
out
lot better
a,
than
you know,
regular
plea
asphalt.
for people to donate
It's actually
trees for
pretty
the
cool.
event garden. People, you know, bought
everybody.
trees, we bought trees, you know, and you got a little
okay.
plaque for
Yeah.
it. So I think trees and trying to transplant trees
It's been there for
are
10 years.
really,
Every now
really
and then they
resonate, and
touch
I
it up.
think people
That's
will
asphalt?
Yeah.
fund
It's
trees.
stick.
So,
I think we should look at stamped AC, where they paint it and stamp it
Oh, okay.
as part of the base. I think we should look at that. If you wanna go see it, you can go see it Stanford in front of Pottery Barn on the,
We have
in
that
the
here,
road.
actually,
Yeah, okay.
across the
It is not a lot more expensive.
Yeah,
It's
it's not.
way cheaper than pavers. It's way cheaper than board-in-place concrete. And it won't,
And where does
asphalt is
resin
really
bonded
cheap.
gravel fit in the cost structure?
Same
About
So-
cracking.
resin bonded,
Resin bonded gravel, where is
Depends how
that in
they-
the cost
they pour it.
structure?
In
More,
terms
less
of
than less than,
It's more than concrete.
it's more than concrete?
Yeah.
So just to make sure everyone's clear, it has to meet the stormwater requirements of Allergen. So we just need a little time to go through, okay, if it is porous, does that help contribute it, but what's that X amount? So we'll have to balance all that out, because it's no use covering it with something that doesn't allow water through and then filling the tank with it.
yeah, so, okay.
So we have to do
Got it.
that, but I just wanna make sure, okay, so we understand, this is again, the ask of us to work with you guys on the base bid for the,
Yeah.
for the Civic Center. Let's talk about that just to make sure we're clear. So in general, like we said, we're gonna try to make the surfaces do hard work. In general, you all like the organization, back to your use discussion, the organization for the market, the very simple, entry and all the other areas that Chris talked about, that seems like pretty good organization. So use is good. We heard no fountain, we heard look at sign on the building and think
We
about.
didn't finish that. That was all over the place. We all agreed we needed a sign, but there was not a consensus on where.
But
It's
look at
gonna
how-
look the most elegant on a monument sign.
And as George mentioned, we have signage funding in the general fund outside of the
Okay.
donation.
So the
so
most
maybe this
elegant
doesn't
is gonna
even
be
need
out there in
to
Fair
be
Oaks.
in part of our bid.
No.
Or it's part of the FF&E, which is part of your bid, but
Yeah.
it's just funded
We
differently.
wanna figure out what we're gonna do.
Well,
No,
just
we don't
make
have
sure
to
it's
see it.
pulled
This
aside,
Do,
make sure it's pulled aside and not in the,
Okay, so that needs more
Right.
coming back to, as far as sign.
It sounds like we should study having it out
Can we-
on Fair Oaks.
I think what we heard is we want people to be able to read the sign from Fair Oaks.
Yeah.
I think that was consensus. So then the question is it a building sign or a monument on Fair Oaks? My personal opinion is a monument on Fair Oaks is gonna be very elegant and understated, and it won't be in your face, and it won't mess with the building
But it
architecture.
has to be readable.
how,
Yeah,
what
it's-
would be
you'd
the
have letters
setback?
like this tall.
Because I think it could be,
Like 12
too
to 14
close
inch tall letters.
to Fair Oaks.
So we'll come
we'd have
back,
to study
I just wanna
that.
make sure,
Yeah,
we'll come
it
back
has to be
with,
set back far enough,
so we'll come back with some signage, that's reasonable.
because
Then
in that
let's
little
go,
green
and then just
area,
again,
it's
back to big
pretty
picture,
close.
everything, Cedar Garden West is Grown Up World.
Oh, you know the one thing that went away that we haven't talked about in a year or 18 months? Because there's no discussion of this. Are the two columns staying? Are they gonna get reused, the ones over there by the train?
You mean the entry columns?
Yes, because that was a big
The
deal
historic
a long
columns
time ago.
with
This
the
group has
lamps
never
on
really
them?
talked about it.
I
Yeah.
thought they were relocated either to Ashfield or.
Ashfield is what we were talking about,
Yeah.
moving those, but not to have them where they're located now.
Right.
Based on
Okay.
all that construction.
'Cause they will-
Located at Ashfield?
That was the thought, that was one of the last discussions we had, from where they are now.
Let's talk about it now, yeah.
Ashfield going
Are
through.
they worth
Really?
moving?
That's
Wow.
for the
Or do they have to move under the current plan, or can they stay where they are?
Why can't they stay
I
where
think
they
there's,
are?
based on the current plan, there's a lot of driveway and road there, so keeping them where they are is
You're
looking
gonna
really
widen
challenging.
the road?
Yeah, all that area right by that.
And it's reshaped.
So we can talk about that next time when people get a chance to think about it, but that used to be a big issue. We just haven't talked about that. Okay.
Okay, so again, kids area to the right of Cedar Garden, and we're gonna work with Tom on programming all of that back area. I'm gonna repeat this one more time, no fountain,
No problem.
okay. And we'll leave seating to another discussion, but we know in general.
It's
find
benches
something-
that are secure,
Right.
except the library terrace can be,
We wanna find
really
a
nice.
little bench to the edge.
but like that huge, beautiful wooden bench, it's $500 a foot. No,
Yeah.
we're not doing it. Okay.
Transplanting the oaks is good.
Yeah.
I think that's something to look at. We didn't talk about vines on the building, but I think we'll come back and explain
Yeah,
if
why
it's
don't you-
on the building or on the wall, and it could be the wall where the police station is, if that's what you guys were thinking.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, cause it's not a critical.
If you go back to that
That's
slide.
problematic also. I mean, it's less expensive, but the vines tend to, when they get mature, they get heavy, they fall off, and you have to cut them down, and then they grow back. So no matter what kind of vines you put up there, you know,
You probably need something.
You know,
on-
one really easy, simple solution is those things that come up in the esplanades, or whatever they call those things.
Espaliers.
Espaliers,
Espalier.
yeah. Mhm. They're instant green.
But they
I
have
don't
to,
think fit the landscape
but they
plan
have to
though.
be maintained.
Watered.
They have to be pruned to maintain as espalier. They'll just turn into a regular tree if you don't
right,
do the actual
yeah.
tree properly.
Okay.
I'm not sure we want to spotted trees in front, even on.
No, I
They
love
just
the
become a
look
green
of
wall.
vines
You-
on the
you very
building,
quickly don't know
but
if
it
they-
is a maintenance issue. I mean,
So the cheapest way to do the maintenance is
Takes
to
forever.
invest in a cable system, like the
Yeah.
image on the right.
right,
Because then you can just have
And
somebody
then
come up there with like hedge clippers
Right.
and just shave it down a little bit, and it doesn't get up
Yeah.
into the soffit and
We've been
stuff.
doing that in our house.
So that's why,
forever.
but that system costs money. So.
The other, yeah, are cypress trees. I mean, they're old fashions.
ooh,
We might not
It's
have
very
enough room.
Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Just,
That's true, it's very much.
you had up there the police
it's
station
not
fence,
Spanish.
chain link.
Yeah. for
Is
the-
it really that big a change in number between that and just a picket, like a metal picket fence?
Remember the number, do you remember?
Well, previously we had a wall.
We had a wall.
Okay.
yeah.
But can metal
Oh,
picket fence be the base instead of
Yeah,
chain link? 'Cause chain link is really the pits, right?
Well, I don't care if chain link faces the tracks.
yeah, I don't mind.
You're gonna, it's the street.
You could
That's
also
what we have
landscape
right
it,
now.
Right now.
yeah.
Yeah, the street's different than the backside. I mean, come on,
It's
let's
pretty
be
visible.
careful.
A and B, you're gonna want,
It'll be
I don't
visible
know.
from the people driving down.
Train
They have
sees.
black chain
It,
link.
it could be black chain link with
Black
vinyl,
chain
it's
link.
probably
Yeah,
fine.
the
But the
black
metal
vinyl.
pickets are not that much more, and they're so much
And you
better.
can plant plants on them.
I had an architectural question, because we've never
Everybody
seen,
does.
the back of the library, when you went, like, one of the very last slides,
Yeah.
yeah, it showed a building that we've never seen this angle before. It's the first time we go, well, there, boom.
It may be a
Is that
little
wood?
old.
That's old, that's an old
It's old.
image.
Yeah, okay, we're not cladding this thing with a bunch of wood, are we?
No, we're not looking at, we're looking at wood and some of the
That's really
stuff.
old.
But that was an old conceptual image.
When does the library come to us? Because,
Well, I think we have to program with,
Tom had the
no, but I mean the exterior of it. Because we've only seen the front, and it looks
We've got a
super
glass
modern.
wall there because it's a reading area it's an indoor-outdoor experience from the inside.
Yeah, but we've never gotten to see we've seen the plan, we've seen the front, we've seen that one angle over and over, but this is the first time we've seen anything that sort of looks like Portola Valley. And we haven't seen what's gonna go really well with the stucco building yet.
I think when we come back
It's
to
a secret, yeah.
Secret garden.
we should, by that
Cedar
time,
Garden.
we'll have, yeah, we can, at the next meeting, the 25th,
Okay.
we'll have our next version.
Okay,
Hey, did I miss
Yeah.
anything?
but we were so big on our stucco buildings that have no wood, no shutters, no nothing, and they have the whole wood building next door, you're like,
It's shaded.
What happened?
It's more different in a shaded
Yeah, no
area.
money.
no money, yeah. Okay, did we answer your questions? What have we not answered, Colleen, or Chris, from all those slides and all those,
This
They
is
do
great. I
things.
think I could generate 2 schemes based on this feedback.
okay.
Good.
Or one.
My instinct is that some of the hydro seeding can become, small trees as opposed to more, bigger
That request was.
box trees.
I'm gonna say staff's request to cut a huge amount out of the landscape, so that's why the.
But in the middle of that civic court, to have 10, 24-inch box trees, it would be silly not to have something in the base bed other than hydroseed grass in the middle of black asphalt. That's
Yeah, and
just,
all
we're
of
never
these
gonna
will
live with that.
be At alternate, and then as we go, maybe that's as we get more
Okay.
detail from the estimate, right?
Yeah.
We can sort of start to
Stick with the basics.
Yeah.
So, Steve, we had talked about a landscape subcommittee at some point.
Go ahead, I'm
Let me
listening.
finish.
Yeah, of course.
I had the same exact issue on the green building committee. There are residents that have a lot of knowledge and opinion and would like an opportunity to give input on these subjects. And the committee isn't opening it up to enable that. So at one point, if you recall, we had a long discussion about the landscaping issue.
Yeah.
Because there were residents that have expressed interest to be involved in that. Doesn't look like we're moving.
I would encourage them to come. I think the big picture is tell them to come. We have a monthly meeting, come to this meeting.
And one of
Come
my
say.
They don't want to be involved in the whole thing. They want to be involved in the landscape piece, or somebody who's got particular, green building or sustainability concerns. They don't want to be involved in the whole thing. They just want to be involved in the issue that they're concerned about. I mean, we get contacted from people all the time, and we try to reflect those opinions, but part of the way that we get people excited about this whole project is to give them an opportunity to have a way to give input to it.
George, I would value your feelings about this, because we've talked about it so many times.
I think more input's better. I think these are public meetings, so there is an opportunity to participate. I think what Rick and the mayor are talking about is an opportunity to engage more members of the community. I think that could lead to a slowdown of the process.
What if we had a
you have to weigh
focus?
those two things.
What if we had a separate meeting? It wasn't a full CCAC meeting. It would be a landscape outreach meeting. We do it once. Chris would be there. Pauline, I don't know if you guys would. You'd probably come. Maybe one of you. And we'd have it in the library or in this room. And it would be just to talk about planning plans and the real deal. And if people can give input, be involved, it really talk shop, and that's all they're gonna talk about. It's not about any other CCAC business. What if we did something like that?
How will they influence it besides talking?
It'll be in the native garden. Had you thought about this species? We found it grows really great in Atherton, and I don't know if you ever used it. It's, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I think your point, Cody,
Yeah.
is decision-making and recommendation of the council rests with the CCAC, not the subcommittee.
No, yeah, no, but these guys will come back and say, we had some really good feedback. There's some species that we didn't realize are actually super native to Atherton. They're unique here because you're, whatever.
Can I suggest something?
Yeah.
Don't we usually have, or we used to have 4 to 4:30 was a time for, okay. So for half an hour, because whoever comes will really want to come, if it's published, that from 4 to 4:30, there'll be boards and detail on planting, the landscape, and then that'll be tied to the CCAC meeting.
My gut would be it's not long enough, that you'll need an hour. Half an hour won't be long enough, but maybe it's from 3:30 to 4:30.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
ask them to
then
come
it
at
can
3:30.
hold-
And this time it will be
They're not coming
focused
up
on
to us.
planning plan.
Right,
We're not,
then-
yeah,
then
that's
there could be-
outside of their scope. We're paying, they have.
Well, for
Yeah.
a half hour.
So they'll come a half hour
If
earlier.
you're already here, that's.
Well, the reason is because then they can stay and hear the rest of the conversation if they want to, and then we could report to you as part of the public process. And that's the way to sort of stay integrated. It's gonna be very hard to have people come at a certain part of the process if we've gone down another road.
Right.
Because they don't
Well,
know,
that's
some of
what's
the,
happening now.
so because there's a budget to balance, schedule to balance, and all of this good stuff. So I think that way it's somewhat connected, at least it's on the same day. I think some of you could come
But
to the
I think the idea of transforming that period before the formal CCAC meeting as an ongoing thing where people could come and talk about the landscaping is better than just a single meeting, because you come to a single meeting, it takes people time, all of us, it takes us time to get our heads into it, to start thinking about it. And if it's a one-shot deal, then they lose
Well, if
the
Well,
opportunity
the
to get real
information would
input.
have to be disseminated prior to.
Yeah, and you're talking about, the people you're talking about are professionals. I mean, they're people,
Well,
this is
maybe
their
or
business.
maybe not.
Yeah. No, maybe, no.
So there's
not
there's a couple of
necessarily.
things that I've done in other communities before that are similar to this. One is having, because there's a lot of mavens out there, horticultural experts that you run into who really know their local community. One is just to have an evening where you sit around and have like cocktails or something and you talk plants. So you invite everybody to come and have like a horticultural
It's an
review.
outreach evening. Yeah.
We recently did something like that for the Warriors Arena where we actually got different facilities managers from different areas around Soma and San Francisco to come and tell us what they thought survived and didn't survive. And they were more than happy to share their free professional advice. I've also done it on side work with garden clubs. It's not a very difficult thing for us to do if it's a planting specific thing. Also, in terms of planting, we can change species of plants more or less fairly continuously throughout this process. It's not holding us up in any big conceptual way. It would probably be a more meaningful conversation once we were further down the road, let's say like 50% DD or later, when we have a real planting plan with these folks. Right now it's just kind of a concept.
So that's in September, October.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we want to do it.
But just a reminder, Chris, we're gonna talk about how it meets some of these sustainable goals. So it's not a wide open.
No, it's not, we want a rose garden. This is native plants. This is low water use, native stuff, right?
You know, we don't have Chris at every one of these
No.
meetings, so if there was maybe a hybrid, as I suggest, maybe once, the hour before, the 3:30 to 4:30, open it up, let people come, he'll take input, and then at the 50%, when he comes back to present, then,
He can say, this is what I heard,
this
here's
is
how
what
I
I've heard,
incorporated it.
and if maybe you wanna schedule that one to be a 6:30 to 7:30, follow on for landscaping afterwards, so.
Yeah.
Cause we wanna maximize the use of his time and minimize the
It
extra
starts
cost.
now on a Monday night and he stays later. Yeah, that feels reasonable to me. Does that work for you guys?
3:30 to 4:30, the next meeting,
July 11th,
And we'll
just once, it's
Work
one
with
time,
Teresa.
that's the input set, that's
Right. Please
come tell us what you care about, knowing that this is a native deal.
Right.
We're
and
going
members
native.
of this committee should do solicitation of people they know. Might
Yeah.
be interested, because
And-
our outreach might not reach everybody.
So,
Yeah, and Teresa can do
You
a
want me to
little,
reach out to the two garden clubs and tell them this is happening?
yeah,
and this is all up on public, you guys are very transparent.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
yeah.
So this discussion and that PowerPoint is pretty easy for folks to get up to speed, at least with what's drawn to date, right?
And we had the previous planting slide presentations that we shared with you that were much more detailed.
They're up to.
Right, I mean, I have the program, I can work with Teresa, we'll post it on the website, we can refer people to that, and then you can tell them when you're inviting them, go to the website, look at that first, and
Look
then
at that
So,
first.
come to
so
this.
July 11th is the first one. I think the next one is September something.
Yeah, it's the second
One of
one.
I would do it at 3:30 again, because he can tell people before our meeting, here's what I think we're gonna do. And if they're unhappy, they stay for the meeting, they come into public comment and they say, hey, they didn't listen to me, I feel ignored, or hey, I really love that they listened to me.
So one of the problems is because it's up on the website, people will look at it and think that this is a fait accompli, because it's on the website, we're doing this. So we have to make sure that people understand that this is a work in process, and that, the first iteration is not a fait accompli, necessarily, and we want.
This doesn't show any plans.
Well, the one
This is
before
idea
did.
generation.
Yeah,
The one
Yeah.
before did.
yeah, but there were just
Yeah.
things we could consider, yeah.
So
My,
are we
my
going to
experience of
prune
gardeners
those
is that they
redwood
don't
trees
hesitate
at
to
all?
share their opinion.
Yeah.
Are we
So
gonna
can
prune
we just
them?
finish this? Does that make sense then?
Yeah, it makes
So
sense
would
to
you,
me.
do you think July
11.
3:30 make, you,
So, yeah.
Can you make
have
it?
something we can
You're
sort of
available?
talk about this is,
Why don't you look, 'cause we're gonna post this, so we make sure you come.
July 11th and September 12th.
Actually, I don't
July 11th and September 12th,
I think it's the 12th.
because we move for Labor Day.
99% of certain I can make.
Is that right, Teresa? Yes. September 12th, okay. So July 11th and September 12th are the 2 days we're positing, and you'd be here from 3:30 to 4:30 both times, and then stay for the meeting. You'd be here from 3:30 to, 6:30-ish.
Sounds good.
Okay. It's a plan, and the first one is input, and the second one, here's the things that we heard, and here's
Heard your
the
input.
things we're incorporating, and here's why.
We'll craft a message to go out on our outreach.
Yeah, and if Teresa can make sure that we see it, or maybe Chris and I see it, so we emphasize native species and.
So what I'll probably go ahead and do, if this makes sense, is to go ahead and get the first draft of the DD planting plan ready for July 11th. so that we're talking specifically with these folks about the species and where they go.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
Yeah.
You're
keep it
coming to
bigger?
listen.
Okay,
You don't have a first draft.
okay.
Don't do
So
it.
I'll just keep with the same
Don't
planting
do it.
palette
You may
and
have lists
concept
of
from
plants
before.
that you're thinking about, that you
Yeah.
like, that you would typically use, but don't have a plan.
Okay,
It'll make them feel like you're not, you're just
Yeah, but
stonewalling them.
what if they're?
okay.
Yeah, don't draw it
You
yet.
can have a little bit, you know.
I can
look-
have the same thing that I had before.
You can have
basically.
ideas.
Yeah.
I think you can have what you had before and go through, there's different areas and some of it's gonna be more built out and some of it, there's a base level, depends on how much fundraising there is as to whether that gets built out.
Mhm.
And solicit their ideas for those different areas.
Sounds
And,
good.
and if you go through the areas, there's a lot of C3, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's really limited what you can put in it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So,
that's right.
and then and the civic court is some trees and maybe grass. Not much of a planting plan, right? You're really talking about the oak woodlands and what goes under the deodars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, but
That's
we're
really
gonna have a-
and that's really most of it. With that.
And whatever front.
But that's C3. It's all C3, I think, out there.
I think they're looking at some landscape.
Maybe a little bit of entrance plant, yeah.
Yeah.
So
some-
really focus
They're
just
gonna
on your
have
planting
opinions
areas.
about not just what is defined as where plants are gonna go, they're gonna have
Yeah.
opinions about each of the areas.
But if we,
Of course, yeah, of course, yeah, we know.
So just one, can I go back, just one other thing. So this is very specific on dates. And so you'll see that they don't match up perfectly with the CCAC every first Monday, right? They don't match up perfectly on all counts.
Is that intentional?
Yes.
So do we need to move the CCAC
No,
out of the
so
way?
I think that this was supposed to be a discussion of, does this clip work? If it doesn't, and you need to do that, we need to stretch, that's why this other.
Even longer.
It's even longer. So the reason was, we need a certain amount of time, we need to check in, we need to meet. If I pushed it a little.
But if you're talking about the advancement of DDs, this committee only cares
Understood.
if you're changing the look and feel of the building materially. Otherwise, it's just staff, it was a project management subcommittee, period. And it's our job to come in here and report, hey, we've been value engineering some things, but the windows are now, instead of, they're aluminum, I don't know what we changed them to. We went from 4 inches of depth to 2 inches of depth or something, because it saved $350,000 in the project.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just wanna make sure.
yeah. But that's it, for design development, this committee doesn't care unless it changes something materially how it looks.
Okay.
And they care about the public spaces, they change about big changes to the building, the public spaces inside the buildings and the landscaping.
Okay.
I think,
Is there
that's,
anything
yeah.
in that that you wanna know?
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So the meeting, the CCAC meeting in August is the 22nd? Do I read that right? That's what it looks
No,
like.
no,
It says they don't match, so.
Teresa, just, it's the first Monday of the month, so unless, so it'll
But
be,
August is dark, so.
it's the first, isn't it?
August first.
This says
August
August
1.
22nd.
So
Where-
part-
what are you looking
Part
at?
of this is,
I'm looking at the calendar.
Oh,
yeah. So part of this is, council needs certain things in time, right? But council and CCAC don't run a week apart from each other, right? So,
Right.
so we're moving towards some of the some of the council
Right.
submissions, and so they don't match up neatly with CCAC. Now,
That-
we
that's-
change it back to CCAC, but you will see things maybe
Right, you'll see things,
sequence.
right, or
So-
not
so-
complete,
Council
not
is
finished.
I'm
dark.
just
See what I'm saying?
saying for purposes of CCAC meetings, if I look, and this is proposing?
This is proposing.
Okay, so that's just what I'm trying to.
so
focus.
staff is gonna work with you between now and the 11th of July to true up this thing.
Right.
And say, either we can live with our CCAC meetings when they were scheduled,
Or
and we will-
suggest an
or there's a
alternative that
couple
works
of, we
better.
wanna move this one and that one.
And then there's also the potential that some of those items that say CCAC are actually the project team
Yeah,
decision-making
the PM
points,
team, yeah.
and not the CCAC decision-making points.
So you'll make it.
So we would
They're
make,
gonna adapt.
yes,
So that'll be a big part of the discussion on
Yes.
the 11th.
yes.
Okay. So what is the agenda for the 11th? This is not coming back then, because you're gonna have your outreach meeting.
Right.
You're gonna report on that to us, what you heard from 3:30 to 4:30.
From a landscape perspective, I could take the feedback that I've gotten today and make revised plans for presentation
just a
folder.
general plan.
Yeah,
I
but
think- I
not
think they're
planning plans,
trying not- Yeah, I mean, I actually think that general, like, here's how we're organizing it, is
Mhm.
probably what they would like to present,
Yeah,
so that it's inviting for
Mhm.
feedback. So
No, I mean, not for that, like, for the council meeting, if you wanted an updated landscape plan per
No.
today's comment, okay.
No, I think what we will need to do for our, in prep for our next meeting is to report back on all the programming that's gonna happen tomorrow, and how that changes or influences the buildings.
right.
And then our meeting with Tom, and how that influences the library, and then we could just,
And then
Generally update.
this one, we'll
Yes.
update, you'll come back with an updated version of this for feedback. Yeah. And then you're gonna have whatever you show to the people at 3:30, you're gonna show that to us and give feedback, what you heard.
I think reporting back is good.
But I think it's a very simple document, it's not this, it's
Yeah.
No.
5 pages at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
it's really simple. Here's the whole site, here are the selected areas, here's what we're thinking. What's your feedback?
Mhm.
Yeah,
We should clap for Gordon.
yeah.
This is your last.
Oh,
What?
we didn't know that.
Gordon,
So-
Gordon,
Yeah. Mary Grace is taking over as city engineer. I'm in a subsidiary role as available.
Which is okay.
Wow, okay. Will you be here on the 11th or no?
Subject to my boss.
Okay, got it.
I want to go.
All right.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you. Okay, big change.
I know.
Yeah.
But we will do well by everything that you've set up for us.
You better.
Don't program in dates.
Well, not put possible, because if I don't possible them now,
That's
they're
right,
gonna get
okay.
filled.
All right.
So just the dates down here.
They're
all
very
of them
likely
are
gonna change.
Mondays, but the
Yeah.
29th of November isn't a Monday.
We'll see what they come back
Yeah,
with.
so it is, so again, I threw one out, I was asked to pull it back, pulling it back just meant, here's some suggested shifts. And then that
Okay.
will be discussion.
Yep, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're adjourned.